So I'm Jamal Dayes, and I'm head of online at a corporate communications company called Bladonmore. So my role of head of online means I look after the part of our business which manages anything that touches the digital ecosystem. So that might be a website, it might be an app, it might be delivering a social media campaign. Anything that essentially is deployed through the internet comes under my responsibility within the business. It kind of depends really. I mean, I don't have a particular archetype that I'm looking for in the role. What really interests me are people that bring something else to the table beyond what's on their CV. When you look at a web developer's CV, they often list out the types of programming languages they know, the type of software they use. That's not actually the focus for us. What we find really important are people who are good communicators and are thinking about how they are articulating their skill set that sets them apart from someone else. So we often interview almost everyone that comes in terms of what their CV is, provided they have the basic skills of web development. But those are kind of box ticking exercises, and actually what we're doing through the interview process is trying to understand who they are as an individual, what really drives them and where they want to be in the long run. So people who have other interests other than just web technologies, but listening out to those who are actually able to articulate what really drives them and what they're looking for in the role. It's people who are able to have a confidence in their own voice and their own thought processes. So when you're working on a project, the things that are really important to us is having someone who has the confidence to stand up and say, actually, have you thought about doing it this way? Or perhaps this isn't quite the best way of delivering this project. What we want people who are able to articulate that kind of message to people who don't come from a tech background. Our experience with the Coding Collective has been really positive, to be honest. I think we were a little bit hesitant around the age range when we first started looking at candidates, just because it was difficult to understand perhaps how versed they were in the kind of technologies that we were using. But what we found was that those coming in just had a real appetite to learn. So even if there was a skill they weren't familiar with or they hadn't used a particular platform that we developed on, they were really keen to kind of get their hands dirty and get stuck into the projects. Having the confidence to say, look, I don't know how to do this, can you show me, was really positive on our side. We initially kind of took one person on to see how this kind of process would work, and since then we've kind of taken on several more because it's generally been really positive. I think the benefit for someone from Coding Collective coming and working for an agency like ours is the exposure to the variety of work that we do. So because we're an agency, our clients are completely diverse. There are multinational banks all the way down to kind of small charities based in the southeast. And so you kind of get exposure to all different types of projects. That might be an email campaign, it could be a social media campaign, it could be a really complex website, it could be an app. You're kind of getting stuck into work on lots of different types of projects. And as a developer, when you're starting out, you may not know which area you want to specialize in, whether that is, web technologies, front-end development, back-end development. There are lots of areas you can kind of start to specialize in, but working in an agency like this, you're going to kind of get to dip your toe in quite a lot of different areas, which will hopefully give you a taste of what you might want to do or to focus on moving forwards. Salaries is a really kind of important question, and it's a question which is, the answer now may be very different to what it is in 12 months' time. So to give you some context, when I started as a graduate, I think I was earning £17,000 a year. Now, a junior developer will probably start on somewhere between 27 and 32, depending on their skill set. So, if we're hiring someone out of university who maybe has 6 months experience, they're probably going to earn somewhere in the region of £30,000. The important thing to articulate is the scale of salaries is very rapid within web development. So as you kind of move from a junior developer to a middleweight developer, that ceiling can happen within 2 years. So you may move from somewhere around £30,000 to £40,000. The ceiling then starts to depend on whether you become specialists, whether you go as a contractor, the type of environment you're working in. So our senior developers will earn around £45,000, but we also have contract developers who basically come in to work on a single project. They can earn anywhere from £290 to £400 a day. So it's a pretty broad spectrum, but a developer who we believe is kind of qualified at that junior level, it's going to be around the £30,000 mark. The skills required to work here have almost nothing to do with university, to be honest. When we interview people, it's actually the other aspects of their personality, how they come across in the interview, what else they're interested in. Those are the things that kind of spark interest for us. So we expect a developer to have the basic principles of HTML, JavaScript, CSS as a very kind of foundation. Beyond that box ticking, for me, it's very much about how the person articulates themselves, how they think through problems, and most importantly, how they would communicate with others within the business. You can teach people how to program. Programming isn't the hard part of the job. The hard part of the job is being able to converse with people who don't come from a tech background, to make sure that they understand what it is you're doing. And if there are challenges, which there always are when you're developing a website, and it's down to developers to be able to articulate those problems to people that don't come from a tech background, to make sure that we're all kind of singing from the same hymn sheet. If a developer can't confidently have a conversation with someone else in the business because they just don't speak to people who don't speak tech, that's a problem for us. Getting into the specifics of the coding, trying technologies is really important. We want to see developers who have an appetite to learn. The web doesn't stand still. Every year there is a new language coming out, there's a new platform to utilise. We're looking for people that have an appetite to take on new languages and are hungry to learn whatever the latest thing is, whether it's blockchain or Node.js or any other kind of framework. We want developers who are happy to experiment. The discipline of being hungry to constantly push yourself and learn new things is intrinsic in the role of web development. The reason why I would say that university isn't important is because it's almost redundant within 5 years of going to it. It's great if you go, because there are clearly wider benefits to going to university. You learn to have ideas with your peers, to have debate, to have conversation, to think about structured learning. All of those things are really good skills, but the reality of web development is what you learn at university in specific to programming is going to be constantly evolving with the way the internet is. So when I went to university 15 years ago, the things that I learned are completely irrelevant to what we're using today. There are some fundamentals there, so the fundamentals of maths, of calculus, of electronics, those things don't change. But the specific web programming languages that I would have studied in the early 2000s would have been redundant within 2 or 3 years of going to university. So why would someone who's gone to university have any more of an advantage over someone who's been learning in their bedroom? There is no difference. And if you look at all of the big tech companies, you look at Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, you look at what's going on with Instagram, all these other platforms, these are kids that started at home on a personal computer, self-taught, developing an idea. That's what it comes down to. And so for us, there isn't a degree or an A-level that is box checking for us. It's really just finding out someone who has the appetite to learn, is hungry to push themselves, and clearly has a talent for getting themselves into web development. And I've hired people from university, I've hired people that have been working in prep. It's a real complete blend of kind of skill backgrounds and skill sets, but ultimately the things that we're looking for are those that are able to confidently talk about their skill sets and have that appetite to continue to push themselves. So there's lots of opportunity for being a developer today. I would say even more so today than there was when I started. I got into computers in and around kind of GCSE age, so I was kind of, had a computer in the house, built my first website, kind of started to understand a bit about programming. But the web still felt fairly separate from everyone else's everyday life, whereas today almost everything interfaces through the internet. All of that stuff is reliant essentially on programming technologies. And I think with the emergence of cryptocurrencies and AI, it's just becoming more and more entwined into everyday life now. So as a developer, there's huge opportunities for what you can do in terms of career progression. I think the interesting thing is, it's no longer seen as like a niche skill that geeks have in the basements of companies. Coding is important to every industry that's out there. And it's almost like speaking a language. It's so prevalent today that I think it's an essential skill. And I think in the next kind of 10 to 15 years, it's going to become more of an important part of the curriculum in schools, because it just touches on our everyday lives. Like I said, no matter what industry you work in, no matter what kind of role you have, your job will more than likely interface through the internet of some sort. And at the heart of that is programming. So if you have that skill set, the world is your oyster. There's huge opportunity out there. It's a really hard question. Where is it all going? What's the world going to be like in 10 years' time? If I had a crystal ball, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I think the reality is things like AI and kind of blockchain and all these new techs are changing the way most of the services that we know today are going to be run. So taking the AI example, it's going to start to do a lot of kind of background tasks which have typically been done by humans. Now that's going to clearly change the structure of what types of jobs become available in society, but I think it's also free up more space for people to be doing more creative things with their lives as well. So 10 years is an awful long time in tech. If you look at where we were 10 years ago, we were barely using our phones to access the internet. Now 95% of internet traffic is on a smartphone. So to see what's been like in 10 years, we often do kind of predictions as to where the web is going, and there are huge kind of theories around the metaverse and whether AI and virtual reality and augmented reality can take over. I'm not quite convinced that's going to happen, but I do feel like there's going to be far more openness around the world. So no matter what country you're in, if you want to interact, have conversations, sell services, there's going to be less state regulation and less reliance on, you live in England, therefore these are things you can do. There's going to be much more of a globalised world, which creates opportunity. There's going to be far more conversations, opportunities to have happening, but that's also going to create challenges as well. I think the interesting thing for developers is it feels like we're moving from, as I said before, the basement of a company to the top floor. Coding is now at the heart of how lots of communication businesses are running, and therefore if you have those types of skills, that gives you a real kind of high seat at the table to have high level conversations. And I feel like developers are going to inform the way lots of businesses are shaping themselves over the next 10 years, which obviously creates huge amounts of opportunity. Again, we've kind of gone through huge step changes with the web, and I think in finance and security, Web3 is going to create lots and lots of opportunity. Would I say to a developer, go and learn blockchain today? Perhaps not. I still feel like it's still finding its feet. I think getting the basic principles of good programming down, being confident, standing up in a room and presenting your ideas, those are the skills you want to learn now. There's going to be plenty of opportunity to kind of get stuck into the emerging tech as you start to develop in your career. You need to don't run before you can walk. Get the baseline in. I can get yourself into a job where you can start to experience working on commercial projects, to understand the pressures of delivering something on time and on budget, thinking about security, thinking about testing, but more importantly than all of the kind of finite details of coding, think about how you are articulating your vision within your role. How are you talking to your colleagues who perhaps don't have a tech background? How can you make everyone else in your business think digital? Kind of bringing that mindset to a business. That's what business will really value moving forward. And they want champions who are confident about talking about where the direction of travel is, what they should be thinking about, what are their priorities, So one mantra I would offer to kind of someone going through the process with, either an internship or kind of upskilling themselves would be to stay hungry. Like, always think about something which is driving you. It's a job that can be quite challenging, but if you're kind of staying passionate about what it is that made you want to get into web development or programming in the first place, that drive will push you forwards. Don't worry about being knocked back when you apply for roles or starting on a salary which isn't quite where you want it to be. If you stay focused on being passionate about the technology, all of that stuff will fall into place. We're moving towards a world which is heavily reliant on tech, and so this is a skill which isn't going anywhere. This skill is going to be vital to the next 20, 30 years of your career, but you need to have that appetite to learn, to thrive in this market, because it's a market which is constantly evolving. The reason why I don't develop anymore is because I quickly realised that the people I was hiring were far more skilled than I was in languages, and so my hunger was more about having conversations, thinking about the bigger picture, and hopefully being a bridge between an idea and the actual solution. But for developers, the ones who seem to move and get the best opportunities are the ones that are constantly pushing themselves, constantly learning and evolving as technology changes. So I grew up in southeast London with three brothers and a dad who was convinced we were all going to be musicians. And so from the age of like 4 or 5, piano was my life essentially, until kind of 14 or 15 when my parents kind of bought me a PC that came into the house. And this is kind of around the time when the internet first kind of started making kind of progress in the UK. Within about a year or two of having it, so I guess I'd have been about 14 or 15, my local swimming club wanted to create a website, and my dad, just being the kind of guy that always said, yeah, we can do that, just said, yeah, we'll give it a crack. And so he bought me a book. The book was kind of a basics to HTML book, and together we sat down and learned how to code a website. And I've been using the internet a little bit, but through that kind of project, I really kind of started understanding the power of the web and being able to create a message that anyone around the world could see. I helped work on the first iteration of Forest Hill Boys School website, and thankfully the school actually found me a placement at a web design agency in central London. So at the age of kind of 15 or 16, I had a 2-week placement at a local web design agency. And I think from that point on, I knew like maybe technology, computers is going to be something I want to work on long term. Yeah, I think the beauty about the web is you can do it. You can start off at home. You don't need to go to a particular course. You don't need to be anywhere to do it. You know, it's a democratized platform in the sense that with open source technologies, if you have a computer and you have an internet connection, to a certain extent, the world is your oyster. You can create what you want to create. And I think the school had recognised that clearly I had an interest in this subject matter. They helped put me on a program which ultimately got me that first placement, and that placement wasn't fundamentally my development, but it gave me exposure to what it's like to work in a company of that type, and that then informed some choices that I made in terms of the A-levels that I did, going on to university, and ultimately kind of leading me towards my first job. You know, I don't think there's a defining moment which says, okay, learning this skill gave me the keys to then go and working in web, but just understanding what it would be like, getting access and exposure to opportunities to kind of see what the working world was like, helped me make informed decisions about the next steps I made within my career path.